April 1986. In the heart of the former Soviet Union, north of Ukraine, there stood a city that represented the technological pride of a superpower, a modern, organized city built for scientists, engineers, and workers who believed they were helping shape the future of humanity. Its name was Pripyat. Nearly 50,000 people lived there. Young families, children, teachers, nuclear operators. The average age of the population was barely 26 years old. It was a young city, full of energy, designed to grow alongside one of the greatest scientific achievements of the 20th century, nuclear power. Just a few kilometers away stood the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. For massive nuclear reactors operated day and night, supply electricity to millions of people. To the Soviet government, the plant was more than an energy source. It was a symbol of progress, power, and technological superiority. But in the early hours of April 26, 1986, something would happen that would forever change the history of nuclear energy and the world itself. It began with a test. Engineers planned to verify whether, in the event of a power outage, the reactor's turbines could still generate enough electricity until emergency generators activated. It was considered a routine procedure. The test was supposed to occur during the day, but operational delays pushed it into the night shift, when a less experienced crew had taken control of the reactor. To conduct the experiment, several automatic safety systems were turned off. The reactor began operating under unstable conditions. Power levels dropped too low. In an attempt to correct the situation, operators removed almost all control rods, the primary mechanism responsible for slowing the nuclear reaction. Without realizing it, they placed the reactor into an extremely dangerous state. At 1:23:40 in the morning, the emergency shutdown button was pressed. It was already too late. Instead of stopping the reaction, the reactor's flawed design triggered a sudden and uncontrollable surge of energy. Within seconds, nuclear power skyrocketed. Superheated steam exploded. The building shook violently. A first explosion destroyed the reactor's interior. Seconds later, a second explosion blasted a 1,000-ton concrete roof into the air. The nuclear core was completely exposed to the environment. The Chernobyl disaster had begun. Highly radioactive fragments were scattered around the plant. Burning graphite blocks ignited fires across the facility. An invisible column of radiation rose kilometers into the atmosphere, but no one fully understood what had happened. The first firefighters arrived within minutes. They believed they were fighting a normal industrial fire. No protective suits, no radiation shielding. Some climbed directly onto the roof of the destroyed reactor. They stepped on pieces of the nuclear core without knowing it. The radiation they absorbed in minutes equaled years of lethal exposure. Within hours, symptoms appeared. A metallic taste in the mouth, dizziness, vomiting, skin burning without contact with flames. Yet the fire had to be contained. Meanwhile, life in Pripyat continued as normal. Residents observed a strange blue glow on the horizon, caused by ionized air. Children played outside. Couples walked through the streets. No warning was issued. The entire city was slowly being contaminated. Only 36 hours later came the inevitable decision. Buses began arriving. Loudspeakers announced a temporary evacuation. Residents were instructed to bring documents, essential clothing, and food for only a few days. They were told they would soon return. Many left tables set, toys on the floor, pets locked inside homes. They would never come back. Pripyat would become a ghost city. Meanwhile, scientists face another terrifying threat. Molten nuclear fuel was melting to the reactor's concrete base. If it reached underground water reservoirs, it could trigger a massive thermal explosion. Large parts of Europe could become uninhabitable. 3 workers volunteered to enter flooded corridors beneath the reactor in total darkness, in highly radioactive water. They manually opened valves needed to drain the area. Their mission prevented an even greater catastrophe. In the months that followed, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, miners, and workers were mobilized. They became known as the liquidators. Helicopters dropped sand, lead, and boron onto the exposed reactor. Men cleared radioactive debris by hand because robots failed under extreme radiation levels. Some workers had only 90 seconds to complete their tasks before receiving dangerous doses. Many would pay with their health years later. A massive concrete structure was built around the destroyed reactor, the so-called sarcophagus, a desperate attempt to contain the radiation. But contamination had already crossed borders. Radioactive clouds spread across Belarus, Russia, and much of Europe. The world learned of the disaster days later. Not from the Soviet Union, but after nuclear sensors in Sweden detected abnormal radiation levels. Decades passed, and something unexpected happened. Without human presence, nature returned. Forests expanded. Wolves, elk, and wild horses occupied abandoned cities. The exclusion zone became one of the most fascinating unintended ecological experiments in history. Today, Chernobyl remains a silent reminder. Technology can create progress, but it demands absolute responsibility. Because on that April night, it wasn't only a reactor that exploded. It was the illusion that humanity had complete control over forces it barely understood. And even today in Pripyat, the Ferris wheel has never turned. The clocks still point to 1986, and silence remains where an entire city once lived.